page.
No, I do this all by myself.
This is all her, man.
This is all me.
All right.
So a little warm up, we can go.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I say testing 1, 2, 3.
I go, Peter Piper picked a pair of peppers. Peter Piper picked a pair of peppers.
Red yellow leather.
Okay, go ahead.
Ready? Ready? I'm going to do my intro and I'll talk you in. Good morning, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to another episode of Silly Girls, Silly Thoughts. I'm your host, Mindful Body with Rachel B. It's me. We're recording on a Sunday today in theme of Father's Day. I have my dad with me. Say hi, Rachel's dad.
Hi, Rachel's dad.
Welcome to the podcast. How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm fine, thank you.
He wanted to relax, but I said I'm
Here with
bothering
all-
you to ask me
Here with all my family and hiccup.
Yeah, we're supposed to hang out on Father's Day.
Yes.
Talk about life, talk about things.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of gave him a little idea of what the theme of my podcast is, normalizing growing up, kind of talking about some silly topics, little silly things that we do growing up. Many of my listeners know that I'm 29 and we'll talk about parenting. A lot of my friends are becoming new parents, and I thought, who would be the best person to ask advice other than my dad? I talk about you constantly on different episodes. You're a pretty grounded person. You talk a lot about science. You talk a lot about math. You've educated me in a lot of ways and impacted a lot of the things I do.
Oh, I'm glad about that.
Yeah, from like routine to gardening. It's all we talk about.
Yes.
So I guess the main question is like, what made you want to become a dad? Do you have like a certain age where
Well,
you
I
even
really
thought?
didn't make a specific choice. You know what I mean? It was just one of those things that as life goes on, it just happened. And I'm very happy about it.
Yeah.
But I didn't set out like when mom and I got married, like, oh, I'm going to be a dad or mom's going to be a mom. It was just like we were hoping to have children and we were a gift of God, so we did have children. So I'm really happy about it. But I didn't have a specific goals.
Were there any things when you guys were preparing to be parents that you were like really excited for or like really nervous for?
Well, I would have to say, to be honest, I was really nervous for because now somebody really does depend on you, no matter what.
Okay.
It's like now, it's like, you know, you can always take care of each other when you're a couple and stuff like that, but then it hits you like now you have a person who really depends on you. So whether you're, I mean, if you had no way to make a living, you'd have to find a way to make a living, no matter what it was.
Yeah.
And that was frightening.
In a silly way, I talk about how my pets are kind of like my pre-babies, like my training babies. You grew up with cats before. Would you say like having cats were like helpful to build just like routine or like way of caring for stuff?
No, because as a kid, you got to enjoy them mostly.
Yeah.
We didn't have to deal with the day in and day out of feeding it, or when it didn't get up at us, you know, at night. It got grandma up at night. So you get all the fun and not to really the responsibility and stuff. But with kids, again, it's really providing for them. That's a little bit of the pressure thing. Day to day, it's very enjoyable and it's so much fun. But it's what helps that as long as in that undercurrent that you have a steady way or a sense that you can provide for them financially and with housing and stuff like that. As long as that little undercurrent is met, then the rest is all a lot of fun.
What do you think was like the most like troubling financially, if you want to answer that? Would
Well,
you say like childcare, food stuff, clothing stuff?
No, well, it was more generalized than that.
Yeah.
The thing was that you knew you had to have a certain amount of money to provide all those things. We didn't really think about childcare. It's like we just wanted to make sure that the two main things you had to provide, right, was shelter and food, right? Those were it could be that basic of an idea.
What were like the good fun stages for you when we were first babies? Like you had three. There's me, my younger sister, my younger brother. What would you say? Like, did you like us in the teeny tiny stage, toddler stage?
No, because then you just still feel that they're just so delicate when you're in the teeny tiny stage. It's really, and I'm not good at gauging young ages, but I'm gonna say like say from one on, when they're really tiny, it's a little bit too scary because they're very delicate and you want to make sure everything's fine. But once they're big enough to somehow communicate with you, like if they're in pain or something like that. I mean, when it's a little baby, they could cry for just because they're hungry, but not necessarily be in pain. But when they're old enough where you can communicate enough with them to say, oh, they're happy now, things are good, or if they're bad now, as long as they're at that level, then it's fun from there on.
I know you you've told us when you worked at AT&T, you kind of kept like a little journal. Do you have any fun
But I
memories or
still
things that
do.
we've said as little kids?
Yes, and I still have that journal. It's on a computer file, and I'm glad I made it because there's so many things that I wouldn't remember
Mm.
if I didn't have that journal. And the same with the video. If I watch old videos that we've taken, I would have said, no, that didn't happen until I see the video. I'm like, wow, I don't remember that at all. So there's so much of that I really think is good to record and remember because it's so easy to forget about it.
Any things that you enjoyed doing with us in those stages? Like, you were the big beach guy. Like, when I go to the beach with the boyfriend, I tell him, like, oh, I remember boogie boarding with my dad. I remember
Right.
doing all this. Like,
Well, I like showing you the things that I had fun with, and
mm,
certainly boogie boarding was one of them. And I probably like teaching you things just the way I felt that my father taught me things, like gardening,
mm-hmm,
fixing things. I got enjoyment out of doing that. So just simple things like nature. So I
mm-hmm.
try to maybe I'm sure I passed down almost unconsciously things to you that my father and mother passed to me, like just the simple enjoyments. You don't need to spend $1 million to go have fun at a park or just to go to the beach.
I see how that repeats a
The simple
lot.
things.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
was joking a few weeks ago on my Snapchat. My dad's not on social media, but I was joking on Snapchat how you would take the three of us to Home Depot, probably to get out of mom's hair. I think it was like cleaning Saturdays.
Mm.
So you would take us to Home Depot to get all the little things you needed and then treat us to Dollar Tree.
Right.
And at some
Right.
point you had to put us on a budget because we were getting too many things. So you're like, okay, we can't get 5 things, but you guys can each get like 2 or 3.
Right.
And then a few weeks ago, I noticed every Saturday I was going to Lowe's with the boyfriend.
Mm.
And after our Lowe's trip, where he would get all his stuff, he would take me to Wawa.
So
And I get
yeah.
my 2 treats, and I'm like, wow, I'm just doing the same
Right. You're
things. And
repeating
it
your
kind of like
childhood.
repeats that sense of peace, the things that you know, the
Mm.
things that you like.
Right. Right.
Were
Like
there
I said, little things.
any lessons when you were like that young age that you learned from your dad that you're trying to mimic? Like, I'm thinking grade school for
Well,
us.
but you just asked lessons I learned from my dad.
Yeah, like when
So yeah.
parenting, like observing when you're in elementary school,
Well,
middle school.
um, to stay calm,
Mm.
to keep things in proper perspective, really, and to not try to jump to conclusions. But I still try to remember that from my father is just to always step back when you can step back and not get too wound up about things.
I see you do that with Hiccup.
Yeah, yeah. And I do it even around the house, even fixing things. I don't get, if it's going to annoy me too much, I start to remember, like, hey, just step back and leave it for some other time.
But you feel in the moment. Humanize those human feelings. We have a
What do you
moment
mean, feel in the moment?
where you and I have our moments where we go like, "Ah, oh no, and then we're like,
Oh,
ah, and then we'll walk away for a second.
oh, there's no question. I mean, I've felt things in the moment. I mean, a couple of years ago, I'll never forget, I got so much satisfaction out of, I don't know why I remember this, but there was a sprinkler that was giving me so
Mm-hmm.
much problems, and I had so much fun destroying it. It made me feel much better. People say, "Oh, you shouldn't let those negative emotions, they can be bad for you." But I said, "No, I felt it actually
Yeah,
helped.
you gotta feel
It
in the
helped me get out that
moment.
aggression on it." And I said, "Good, now it's broken. I do feel better, so I don't have to deal with that
I
anymore."
think that's such an important lesson that I try to promote as a therapist on this podcast. It's like
Mm.
you have to have the balance.
Yes.
Like feel your anger and your negative feelings within boundaries,
Right.
within
Of course,
spaces.
within boundaries. Yes.
Yeah, feel
Yes.
comfortable and then uncomfortable.
Sure.
So we kind of challenged that, not challenged, but we talked about grade school, elementary. What would you say are the hard parts of parenting? Because I'm your firstborn, so I know it was the most annoying.
Oh, you weren't annoying. You're very inquisitive and stuff, and
Mm,
that's fine. I think one of the hard parts is you always want your kids to always be happy and stuff like that.
mm,
And with school and with growing up, right, there's always going to be those times where, oh, these people aren't nice, or these people aren't friendly anymore, or these are my friends now and that's not my friend now. So I think the thing that you always think about is I want to raise my kids to always be the friends for other people because that's what I'd want for them.
I talk to a lot of nervous parents.
Hmm.
What would you say when it comes to that, like that bully stage? Because even you would talk a lot about bullying for us.
Right. And I think the bullying stage is a probably one of the most difficult stages of parenting, I
Mm,
think, because we always want to be around to protect our children and stuff, and we know we can't always be around, and so that they're going to have to learn to deal with the bullies and stuff. And that's where I learned where I think it's important to learn emotional intelligence, even as a child and stuff, because there's going to be times when there's just going to be mean people and things like that, and that's just part of life. And it would, I always think it would be nice if there was a stage or an age where that completely ended, but it really
Mm.
doesn't always end. So you have to have emotional intelligence to deal with people like that, the difficult people in life, which they're in the minority, but nevertheless, it still can be an issue sometimes.
Yeah, I got parents who always get worried. They're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. But I'm kind of just say like, you can only go so far. You can only do so much. But like, you always said like, once we're home, we're home. Like this is safe base.
Yes, and that's where I feel sorry for
Mhm.
the generations now. And I'm not saying anything new when you see on the news how with social media and the computers, it's always there. And that's why when you guys were growing up, there was a demarcation between the protection of the home and us and the outside world, where
Mm.
now it's right. So if I was a parent these days, I'd probably be one of the parents to say everything gets turned off when you walk in the door at 3 o'clock.
Mhm.
If it's not homework or school related or something, that I would shut everything off, and you're not
Mm.
going to read any Facebook or TikTok or things like that because you need to maintain your sanity, right?
Yeah,
That's
because I
the way
think
I would see it.
social media started when I was in middle school. Like we
Right.
had
And
MySpace. I think I was sixth grade, but I
mm,
wasn't on MySpace.
okay.
And then it was like Facebook, and then it just skyrocketed through
Right.
high school
And then you
on.
just hear about all those terrible stories about the abuse that happens with kids from either classmates or strangers or whatever.
There's
And
so
it's like,
much. It doesn't
yeah,
go off.
right. And I would turn it off. So,
What would you say for, because I have a few, like, I work with a lot of dads who are kids are going off to college. What would you say? Like, I followed your footpaths in a way. I went to Brookdale and I did Ramapo. Because I think I even asked you, like, I didn't tour colleges. I think you just said, well, I really like the woods, and you like the woods, Rachel. You should go to Ramapo.
yeah, I mean, I just felt that there's so few people. I always would laugh when people would say, oh, this kid knows that they want to do this and they're going to go here, here, and here, and they have their whole college career and career mapped out. And I just think they're really in the minority. I said the vast majority, including me, of people I've known, they haven't known what they wanted to do even through their whole life. They're always
Hmm.
finding something new that they want to do or some new interest. So that's why I always felt community college was good because you're not spending as much money trying to figure out what you want to do. And then once you have a little idea of what you want to do, then go to a 4 year school. But I think colleges was one of the greatest times. I enjoyed college so much. Again, not, and I'm not talking about some partying thing or something, but just being on your own, being
Yeah.
independent, having to be responsible for yourself,
Hmm.
doing what interests you, but also knowing that now you have to be the one who's disciplined enough to sit down and do your homework and things.
Hmm.
So I thought college was great, but again, I think it starts showing that you're now more of an adult because now you're responsible, and if you want to spend all the money to go to school, and then you want to waste it when you get there by partying or whatever, well, now it's on you. So it teaches you responsibility.
Did you have to prepare in any way? Like, what kind of advice would you give to parents? Because a lot of my parents are preparing their kids for their freshman year, like living on dorm out of the house.
Well, I think one of the things, the important things is if hopefully they can find a roommate that they get
Hmm.
along with, that they mesh with,
Hmm.
that sort of has similar interests. But then that always takes some adjustment. But if they're lucky enough to find initially people that they get along with, I think that's a big help because then you help each other, you have support of each other.
Hmm. Hmm.
But that's about all I can think about for
Yeah.
that.
I didn't have too much trouble in college.
No, that's good. And I found most people don't. They might have roommates that if they don't get along well with, they shift around and find other roommates till eventually they get into the routine of people they can live with and then they start finding their own way with courses they like or teachers.
We coexist. Was
Hmm.
there any stage in parenting me that you enjoyed the most? Like, was there at a certain age or something, or certain activities that you enjoy?
Well, again, it's probably I think there's enjoyment at each stage.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think there's any question there's enjoyment at each stage. When you're real little and you can do school plays and things like that, that's just a lot of fun because you're so innocent and the way you look at the world, you have a certain perspective to look at the world.
Mm.
So that's enjoyable. But then when you get bigger, it's just nice to see your own personality developing and what interests you have, which may not be mine or may be different, but it's still interesting to see.
Mm.
And you can develop certainly admiration for your kids. Maybe they've done some challenging things that you wouldn't think of doing,
Mm.
right? It's almost the old saying, like, don't give your children your fears.
Like my sister doing derby.
Laura
That
doing
scares
derby,
you.
I always thought you would do different extracurricular activities
Hmm.
that maybe I wouldn't have been like,
Do you remember when you would take us on Saturdays for different
yes,
classes? Like we did chess, we did sewing.
right,
Like you would, again, I think it was just those Saturdays you would take us out of mom's
right.
hair and we would take different
Take any
classes and you would
classes you
just,
want just for fun.
yeah, little
That was a
Saturday
lot of fun.
classes.
So yeah, so that was fun.
We've had a lot of fun adventures with you. I remember like my memories with you that stand out the most are like Halloween, to always stick my head in the bag to
I
smell the
always love Halloween.
candy.
I
I
still love Halloween.
finding all the candy you would hide and like have that
Right.
ongoing war with you of who
Well,
got
I
to your
think
candy
with
first.
Halloween, I live how do you say it?
Vicariously.
Vicariously through you because I think of when I was a kid in
Mm.
Halloween, and there were so many kids, so many more kids, that was like a national holiday. So I always enjoyed it so much. That's why when you kids went out for it, I had just as much fun because it reminded me of when I was a kid.
You put a lot of emphasis on like big holidays too about food. Like my dad is the person who says, "Don't have breakfast, save your appetite." Like Thanksgiving is coming, Christmas Eve
Well,
dinner.
yeah, there's
Like
certain
you have
food
that
I always,
excitement over holidays too. So I feel like you maintain this sense of like my poor mom gets anxious because she plans so much and prepares so much. So I feel like mom has that normal stress of an adult where my dad kind of highlights that childlike excitement of like, I can't wait
right.
to see who cooks what
Well,
dessert's
that's true.
coming.
I probably got to enjoy the fruits of everybody else's labor more on the holidays because I'm sure my mother did all kinds of things. But to me, it was always, since I was such part of a big family, it was
Mm.
always a big family thing, and that I enjoyed a lot. So holidays were always a big family thing, and it was a family thing. I knew I was going to have fun.
I've definitely highlighted, I think, on a few episodes that you're one of 8 people. Did you
Right.
plan to have like 3 children, or did you want something smaller in this
No,
lifetime?
we didn't plan on any number of children, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
Um, so I think we would have been happy with two, but when we had three, I was even more happy
Yeah.
because I always felt, oh, good, this breaks the tie. You can always, with two can go back and forth, but when you have the tiebreaker, so it was a great surprise. We were very happy when,
All air signs too. My dad's a Cancer, my mom's an Aries, so we have some cool zodiac energy in the house.
oh well, I don't really,
I use those silly ways for some of my teens when we talk about their parents. I'm like, look, your parents not here in the room, but your dad's a water sign. I could see why he's feeling a little
okay,
emotional about that.
all right,
It's how we make sense of things and the
mm-hmm,
things that we can't control.
okay.
Are there things that you have challenges with when it comes to like us as adults?
Um, well, I think it's not a it can be a little bit of a challenge, but it's seeing you as an adult, so accepting your beliefs and systems and values and stuff, even though they may not necessarily be mine,
Mm.
right?
We've
I
had
mean, I
chats.
don't think that's just going to be that's the way it is.
Something I talk about so often is like I highlight how you and mom have shared like a sense of balanced ideas and
Mm.
ideology in this household. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would say I hope that the three of us, again, I can't speak for all three, I can only speak for myself, but even when it comes to the amount of pressure and black and white idea in
Mm.
society, like you and mom with politics would always share two sides. You and mom would always be open minded to discuss
Well, right, you
certain
have to be able
matters.
to look, everybody develops and has their own opinions and stuff, and you have
Hmm.
to, if you ever want to get along with other people and still have a relationship with them, you're going to have to respect their opinions and stuff. Otherwise, you'd never have any friends,
True.
right? Nobody's ever
You
going to
taught
agree
that
with every.
realistic mindset though, which I
Well,
think is
right,
so
and I
important.
think in order, especially when you hear, I mean, especially with some parents who are distant from their children and stuff, right? Usually that's really the issue.
Mm.
It's right. The parent says, well, you have to believe this or vote this way or that way. And if their child doesn't want to, as they grow up to be an adult, they don't want to be that way, then they break off all.
They expect this extension
Right.
rather than
And
this
I don't think that's
individual.
that's a good thing because
Mm.
you'll never have a relationship with your kids if you don't let them be their own independent adults on their own, right?
Mm. You have a puppy too. We've had
We
Hiccup for
have
10
Hiccup.
years.
We've had Hiccup ever since he was a puppy.
Do you feel like hiccups highlight? I remember when we've gotten hiccup as a puppy,
Mm.
and I think when he was still in that puppy phase, he wasn't sleeping through the night, and it almost
It
imitated the
right.
baby phase. I
It
remember you
brought me
saying
back.
like it brought you back to like us being
It brought me back to
babies.
those. I always said when I see new parents, I just remember I like to make up these like different laws of nature from my own perspective at work, and I always felt the first 6 weeks was always the toughest
Mm.
because you were like a zombie because the baby was always waking up at different times. They wouldn't sleep through the night, so you never got a full night, 8 hours sleep. You always felt like a zombie, and that's the way Hiccup was when he was a baby. I would come down here and he was a little puppy, and I would purposely sleep on that couch, and he would sleep for like maybe an hour or two, and then he'd wake up and he'd run around in circles in the rec room, and then he'd come back up on the couch again and go to sleep. So I said it's just like having when you guys were first born. It was no different.
I think sometimes when I look at my animals, I always think of your voice, and it almost comes out like that. And my boyfriend will start laughing because he'll be like, "Whiskey, you gotta wait. You gotta wait,
Yes.
Whiskey. We
Yes.
can't. Chubby, no. Chubby, no."
Yes. Hiccup does not like
So I'm here practicing
waiting.
my parenting speech before even become a parent, if I can, God
Right.
willing. And I have your little voice in my head sometimes, so it always makes me smile.
Right.
And
Hiccup.
sometimes my cat will remind me of Hiccup so
He only
much.
knows now. That is all Hiccup knows is now. Right, Hiccup?
Yeah.
He's a complete zen. He's always in the moment.
If you could rate parenting, what would you give yourself from 1 to 100? How do you feel as confident as a parent?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So I can be like, I'm gonna do like somewhat of I feel like a safe number. So
Okay.
like a 75, right? You're not, certainly not 100, but I don't think a 50, you
You
know.
raised some pretty good
I didn't slap you
kids.
silly or anything, so
I
that's why I'm
still find it
giving myself a
a nice
75.
little like warm haha because your oldest sister might says
Mm.
that we're the coolest kids.
Oh,
she
that's
she
nice.
thinks that we're the funniest, and I'm just like, ah, we are, aren't we? And she's always like, you guys are raised such great kids.
Oh, that's
People always
Aunt
have this.
Kathy is such a very loving and charitable and nice person,
You
so
come
that's
from a
very
really
nice.
good family too. You have some really supportive siblings, and everyone is so grounded
Well,
for the
again, I
most
think that
part.
comes from certainly it comes from grandma and grandpa, but I think that's one of the certainly there's disadvantages, but one of the advantages of a big family is that you have to learn to get along, right? Because you're in a big family. If you guys don't get along, it's always going to be chaos. So it's part of being in a big family. It's cooperation.
What would be like 3 values that your parents and even just my grandpa instilled in you that you kind of tried your best to instill into your family?
Well, I would have to say the first one is faith,
Mm.
and people have it different ways, but I don't think they certainly would have gotten through life the way they have without that,
Mm.
with some sort of faith. I don't know how anybody gets through life without some sort of faith.
Mm.
Um, I mean, love, certainly love. I mean, I'm sure there were times it must have been very difficult for
8 kids
for
in one
them to love us,
house.
and there was always right when you have 8 kids, there's always a problem somewhere if there's not multiple problems, right? So I think love is another one, and then I would just say maybe it goes sort of love, but family was
Mm.
so important, and it was really a gift. It's almost like a free gift because I think sometimes that's one of the things as an adult. I think that sometimes I may have taken it for granted as a kid, and I didn't even realize it how enjoyable family was for me. And so when I'm as an adult, and you see people who don't have family and stuff, you say, boy. I really appreciate what I have, and I didn't always realize the gift I had. So I would say those faith, love, family are the ones that have the biggest impact.
A lot of our high school friends didn't have like a calm dad around. So like my dad was always that calm dad because you give off
Mm,
an aura. Like I group a lot of people. You know
mm.
that game, like who is it when you have like the tabs of all the different pictures of people and you have to guess who the picture is. I always say like, oh my dad's your typical like calm white dad, and everyone's like tucked in t-shirt, New Balances. I'm like, yeah, like my dad gives off safe dad vibes. Like you're not this overwhelming, overpowering. You're this kind of go-to, which I think a lot of
Right.
people forget. A lot of people get wrapped up in this idea of leadership or family, and
Mm,
sometimes people forget like being the man or father of the home too also means you have to ground and you kind of keep that balance when
Well,
things get
yeah, and that's the
crazy.
way really my father was. My father,
Mm.
Grandpa was not. He was not some big boisterous, jock, big lad. He was like I always see him like the calm, safe haven. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Just calm. I always see him like the steady stream, which is nice.
Mhm.
I mean, I certainly like that. Grandma was more. I always see her like she's sort of like the river rapids, where she wasn't crazy or anything, but she was more animated, more social and stuff like that. So she was the river rapids, he was the calm stream. So it was a nice
Nice balance.
balance. They balanced each other
That's
out.
so sweet.
Mm.
My best friend always says like he and his wife, there's the rock and the moss. Like the
Okay.
rock is the more grounded and
Right.
the emotional is the moss. So sometimes people interchange, sometimes the personalities stay consistent.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. I have my sister, her partner, and my mom sitting on the couch on the side of me and kind of going back and forth on questions. So my sister was asking, one of the questions being, what were some ways, even you kind of said it a second ago, we might have some things that we have in common as we get older and sometimes we don't. Did you put an active effort to be interested in few of the things I was interested in?
Sure. Because I know that you're not me. I know you're your own person. So I'm curious to see how you're going to grow and what you're interested in, what your strengths are. They may not be my strengths, right? They might be a strength that I'd want to have that you might develop on your own.
Mm.
So yes, I was very interested. And plus, um, it's it's almost like an egotist thing too. Not to be egotistical, but you're still part of me. So I'm always going to be curious in what you're doing.
Mm.
I still see you as God gave you guys to us, but you're still in a way part of us. So it's if I'm interested in myself, I'm also interested in you because I know that since we're related, it's part of self-interest too, I think.
Friendships. Dad never really remembered our friends' names, but he would remember like silly qualities. Like he'll remember my friends' voices, he'll remember like
Right.
their heights. I was giggling in my head because we're recording in June, so it was Pride Month, and
Mm.
I've been bikini shopping, and there was one with fruit on it, and I wanted to buy it, and I was like, oh, I already know what the tagline's gonna be, and it was like, my dad never promoted any form of like hate slurs, but he always would ask, isn't that your friend who's a little fruity? Like I'll always remember such like cute little things dad would say, and I'm just like, that's my dad who would say such sweet little stuff. Not
Oh
like
boy.
we never lived in a house of hate, which I think, and I don't say like many people do, but so many houses are filled with such verbiage that's so mean and bully type. Like you always said such sweet things that was inclusive, and you taught. I would say like I always saw kindness from you.
Well, I really think a lot of that comes. I mean, certainly my father wasn't that way because in a way, I saw my father in a way like a minority in a way because he
Mm.
had as my sister said in kindergarten, she said, "Oh yeah, they wanted each kid to talk about their family and my dad, he's the dark one, so because of his olive skin,
Yeah,
and
he's
grandma
Italian.
also was the great grandma was she was very non-judgmental. I
Mhm.
mean, she wanted to be what she espoused, a Christian and stuff like that. So to be spouting hate and then but going to church each Sunday and stuff,
It's
she
hypocritical in a
couldn't she
way.
couldn't live that way. She
Mm.
couldn't live that hypocritical way. Where I know that. And then when Grandpa told us stories about how his grandparents,
Mhm.
right, with Mamie Summers and my great grandmother having to make up that fake name on a job application because if she put her Italian name, she knew she wouldn't get the
Oh, I
job.
didn't know that.
Yes, that was Grandma Tucci. She looked quite American because she had very white skin and stuff. But whenever she filled the job out and she said Carmela Tucci,
Mm.
she never heard back. So she used the fake name. I have it on our family tree site on the web. Her name was Mamie Summers, and
Mm.
once she put that on employment applications, she would get called back.
See, I don't think about those things too many times. I don't talk to you enough about like your side of the family because I don't know, we don't practice too many cultural things in the house. Like I always joke, I'm like our last name is the most Italian thing about me because we're very
Well,
like
that's true. We were right. We
we're very
weren't big into
Americanized.
right to saying, oh, it's Italian, so you can only speak Italian when you go see grandma, or it's
Yeah.
Irish and you have to only do this. So I would say yes, we certainly knew of our heritage, but we didn't really bring it into the home that way. Like,
Mhm.
so I agree with that. Hiccup, you have to wait.
Hiccup, you gotta
You
wait.
have to wait. Come here.
I guess I would ask like how like it's very easy I feel like to get absorbed in like the responsibilities of life, like working, paying bills, making sure all that's taken care of. So how are you able to stay grounded enough to be able to like take care of those things but also make sure you make time for
Well, that's true. I
your
agree.
family?
Life could
Time management.
time management and stuff certainly can take away from things, and it's really an old saying, and I know it's been overdone, but it is true. It's just certain things you just say, look, I'm going to make time for this, no matter what. I'm going to make time for this, and that's what you have to do. If you don't carve out the time for it, and we've seen it just even day to day, even now, like to make a dinner date with somebody,
Mm.
or even the family picnic. If you don't put the effort in, or if somebody doesn't put the effort in, that's what happens. It just never gets done. So, right, I mean, and that's why I like we all take turns with different things. Like I've taken on, or we've taken on, like the Thanksgiving thing or the biscotti thing. And it's like, no, if we want to maintain this
Mm.
through this family, even extended, then somebody has to either take ownership and put the effort in. Because if we all wait for somebody else to do it, what happens? It doesn't get done, and then it just goes by the wayside. And they say, "Gee, we haven't had a dinner with anybody in 5 years, and now this one's gone or that one's moved or whatever." So it's true. Certain people have to, the ones who step up to the plate, they take ownership and they make the time, and people do appreciate it.
You've maintained a lot of traditions in our family. Like, I feel not that we don't have traditions on mom's side of the family, but my mom's side of the family is a lot smaller because we have more family in Puerto Rico than we do in the United States.
Mm.
Where I don't know if it's because you have so many siblings, where there is that emphasis of like tradition and annual things.
Well,
Like,
and it's nice. I think what it is too, it's a sense of also see it as almost a sense of fairness. Like one person can't say, "Oh, each year I'm going to have people over for Christmas and stuff," and then the rest of us sit back and do nothing.
mm,
It's like it's really not fair. So that's why I think it's great that I can say, "Oh, we do the biscotti and we'll do a Thanksgiving," and that's how it's nice. Then it's just a sense of fairness. Like if everybody does a little bit, then we can all enjoy things. But if you have one person being saddled with everything, they're going to get frustrated and they're going to say, "You
burnout
know
in a
what? Nobody
way.
else is doing anything. Why should
Yeah.
I?" So I think it's just a question of fairness that everybody should put in effort. Uncle Peter and Aunt Sue, they always used to have a Christmas party. So everybody's always done something to try to maintain that, hey, we're a family, but I think we should all, if we want to stay a family, we should all share in the effort to keep that family going. And so everybody takes their little task.
Since you're talking about siblings, you like brought a question in my head. I feel like as I'm getting older, converse about like getting older and what to expect and things that we've learned. When you were like getting married and having children, your siblings were doing the same. Did you find it helpful to share advice or like because one person went through a stage earlier or after, do you feel like it was helpful when it came to parenting
No, I'm going
advice?
to be honest. I don't think
No?
I think again I go back to something I said earlier where when we would visit, like say my brothers or sister got married, before we got married and stuff, and
Mm.
they had kids, but we just went there and we just were able to enjoy the kids and then go home, right? So we just had all the fun,
Yeah.
and we didn't have to deal with or ask about the realities of it or advice or anything. And then when it was our turn, we just sort of learned. But of course, if I had a question or mom had a question, she could ask her parents or I could ask my parents. So we still got
Mm.
advice from our parents, not so much, although our siblings could give us advice and stuff, it was really, we just got to enjoy their kids when they were little. And then when their kids got cranky, we could go home.
Was there any good advice you got from either grandma or grandpa when it came to parenting?
Well, I think one of the better ones, and to this day, and I think
Mm.
it's just something to try to remember, and I remind myself is one grandma had was like, keep the lines of communication open.
Okay.
That was always her, right? Because just like anything, people in general and stuff, you're going to have either disagreements or issues or whatever. And she would always say, well, you got to remember to keep the lines of communication open.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one that it's easily it echoes in my head every so often when whatever may come up. Like think of things like that.
If you could give any advice to just like new parents in general, again, I have so many friends who are new parents, their kids are like toddler stage or they're just having their new babies or trying to have babies at this stage. Like, what kind of advice would you give early parents?
Um, Well, probably a couple things. Just
Go
the way
ahead.
things are now. I would
Yeah.
say, like, don't sweat the small stuff. Don't
Mhm.
look everything up on the internet. You'll just go crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Did you
And
read books or anything when it came
we
to
did.
preparing?
There was a famous book that I'm sure is still around called "What to Expect When You're Expecting,"
They made movies about that now.
and I'm sure that's the book that we got just to say, okay, just to have an idea of what was going to go on.
Mhm.
And then I would say probably in addition to that, it would probably be as long as you have a good pediatrician that you trust, right?
Yeah.
They're going to take care of a lot of your worries because I think that's the, is
We
my
had
kid
such
sick
silly
or
things
is this
happen.
wrong or is that wrong? And a good pediatrician is going to probably calm your fears and say, oh, this is something kids go through or they get
Mhm.
this and it's temporary. So I would say that would be a really helpful thing is to have a pediatrician you can trust. And of course you can always ask your parents and so many of them will say, don't worry, this is okay, that's okay. And you realize that the kids aren't they're not as delicate as you think they are when they're so little. You think they're gonna
Yeah.
break in half,
Kids are pretty tough.
Yeah.
I think I only learned that from kids yoga. You really see them bounce like rubber
Right.
bands. They fall, they get back
Right.
up.
Right. Right. And you don't want to shelter them so much where they're afraid to do anything because of that. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. You don't want that to happen. Yes. And you want to be on the on the same page as you would say. I would agree with that too because if the kid sees you fighting and stuff, they're gonna not they won't know which way is up. Right? They'll always be confused.
How, what would you say for kids with anxious kids? Because I was always an anxious kid. Like, I've talked about my anxiety on the podcast. I even talk about it as a professional. I say, like, oh, I'm a professional anxious person. Like, these are my silly thoughts, my silly things that I do for my anxiety. But I've had it for a long
Well,
time.
I think, and this is where I think even as kids,
Yeah.
and it goes back to even the way faith and things like that. Like when I was a kid growing up, I think it was important to know that you had a family who always loved you and stuff. But I always found comforting the ideas of guardian angels and things like
Mhm.
that. I found that very comforting
I have
because,
my spiritual practices
right,
always.
whatever things like that can help you.
You would show me like breath work every now and again.
Yes, yes, that's I tell you, I think it's from the famous book, like even before Transcendental Meditation and stuff.
Mhm.
It's a very old book. I'm sure you can still get it, and it's probably one of the very earliest self-help books. But it's called The Relaxation Response, and it's probably printed in like 1960 or whatever. But it was, I would say, so many books these days, all reprints and stuff. They're all based on the basic idea of that
Pretty
of
much.
breathing and calming down, but they use newer lingo so they can sell more
I
books.
only talk about so many books because even I get tired of the self-help
Right.
books.
And a lot of them are really saying the same thing that were even said in this book, what, over 50 years ago now.
I'll joke about how therapy is like those cliche posters.
Right.
I was telling the
Right.
boyfriend yesterday, I was like, if you really think about it, life is really as simple as those posters of the
Right.
cat hanging on the
And they're just
clothesline.
putting in right, they're just putting in newer words or different language that for the times. But yeah, a lot of times they're really saying the same thing over and over again, just in a more current framework.
Yeah, that's really it. Any closing words on your end?
Enjoyed my interview.
Yeah, wasn't that
Yes,
bad,
it actually
right?
came out better than I expected.
See, I'm not a bad interviewer. People say that I give off a calm ambiance
Yes, you
for them
do.
to feel
You
chill.
must take after your father.
I know, right? Trying my best. All right, ending today's podcast. Thank you, Dad, for recording with me. I appreciate and love
Thank
you for
you.
that.
Love you too.
This is our Father's Day episode 10. I believe we have 5 more to go until the season 1 of Silly Girls, Silly Thoughts podcast closes for the season. What do you think about that? 15's my cap off.
Wow, that's
It's
great.
been a really good time. But that's the end of this episode. I'm your host, Mindful Body with Rachel B. and Rachel's dad. Wishing you all a great rest of the day, weekend, and week to come. Until
Happy
next
Father's Day to
time,
all.
happy Father's Day pre recorded. I'll see you all next Wednesday.